very good evening and welcome to South Africa Today and Beyond. We are now in season 3. Thank you so much for joining us and thank you so much for the support the last 2 seasons. This evening in the studio, I'm joined by Sarah Mukwevho. Welcome to the show, Sarah.
Thank you, Cara. Thank you for having me.
So you're a lot of things, Sarah. I mean, you are a master's student, a feminist, part of the Fees Must Fall movement, and I mean, generally you're an activist and you do a lot of stuff in your work time. But I mean, particularly what I would like us to discuss today is the issues around rape culture and being a feminist and being in these spaces, especially on campuses, and having experienced, a culture of rape on campuses. And I know you've appeared on TV a number of times, in the forefront of the feminist movement, in particular at Wits University. But maybe unpack to our viewers the concept of rape culture itself. We see two concepts: there's culture and there's rape. Maybe unpack what the concept means to our viewers.
Okay, so the concept of rape culture, or what rape culture is it sort of like looks into, or it speaks on the actions that people do that contribute to rape culture. So it's more of the nuanced things of it that have just been normalized, things like somehow you think it's not okay for a girl to get drunk at a party, or that you're not supposed to dress a certain way and all those kind of things because you provoke men. So that kind of thing, that kind of normalization actually also normalizes or manifests into rape culture, because now, excuse me, what you're trying to do is that you're trying to police the other person, and now you want to make it the victim's fault that they end up being sexually violated. So the most part of it is that it's how like the day-to-day of people has been normalized into, like the day-to-day things people do have now been normalized, and actually, as a matter of fact, those things actually do contribute to rape culture.
And I mean, some of the examples that you're giving, and it tends to be quite trivialized, and people, make jokes about it. People make jokes about rape and think it's okay. That exam raped me. Those kind of concepts that we hear on social media, for example. But also things like, when you're whistling at a girl when they're passing down the street. Those things are trivialized, and when women speak about the fact that it makes them uncomfortable, people think, what's so wrong and stuff like that, And those are sort of the day-to-day examples that we can give, I think, around the issue of rape culture. But, there is rape and there's rape culture. And sometimes people use that interchangeably. And I think it's correct. Maybe take us through, what's the difference between, rape itself and rape culture?
Okay, so rape culture, maybe if I put it in simple terms, is where rape would manifest. So rape obviously is sexual violation, which is most times it's physical than anything. Well, sexual harassment on the other side there needs not be a physical interaction to take place, because sexual harassment can be, the catcalling that you said, someone whistling at you, someone staring at your boobs or at whatever it is. So that could be some form of like sexual harassment. Whereas with sexual violation, that's when now most times it's like the physical contact, when somebody forces themselves on you. And normally the stereotype about rape is that it's something that happens between two people who are strangers, and then you bump into each other at night at an alley somewhere, and this person is violent towards you and they force themselves on you. So that's not the only type of rape. Rape comes in many ways. Rape happens in relationships. Rape happens in marriages. Rapes happen between friends and all those kind of things. Whereas with rape culture now, it'll be things that normalize the rape. For example, they'll say, why were you walking at night? This is why you were raped. Or no, it cannot be that you are raped in a relationship because your body belongs to your boyfriend or your husband or whatever it is. So, yeah, I don't know if...
Sure. I mean, and you're raising an important example, especially around the fact that rape can take place within marriages, and with instances where legislations of governments in different countries, in various countries, where people, the law would say that it's not possible. A husband can't rape their wife. And I think it's quite important also to, to talk about the fact that that is very much possible. And the law also needs to evolve as society evolves as well, and speak to the fact that this is a reality on the ground every single day that women experience these sort of things. But let's talk about culture. And I mean, we can understand culture from a sociological viewpoint, culture is transmitted through, through space and time. Culture is also learned, and I think it's quite important to understand that. People say, no, but it's tradition, it's culture,
It's been that way forever.
Exactly. Speaking about things quite dismissively as though things are cast in stone, and things that have been done repeatedly over a period of time. And people think that that is normal. And I mean, social institutions are formed through repetition, through legitimizing, whether correctly or incorrectly, certain actions, How difficult is it, or how is the role of the so-called culture and the transmission of information and acts and beliefs and ways of doing things over a period of time contributed to the culture of rape?
So in maybe a university context, and I think it's also important to acknowledge the fact that we exist in a patriarchal society. So, and patriarchy is not a class issue. So whether you find yourselves in the township and you're a lower class, or you find yourself maybe in university space and you're regarded to as middle class, you're still somehow affected by the same thing when it comes to patriarchy. And so with that, it's even when you find yourself in a university space, because you're existing within this larger construct, which is patriarchy, many things get normalized. It's just that they look different because also patriarchy has a way to maneuver itself in spaces. So, for example, in maybe in a lower class maybe circumstance, if I should put it that way, or in the township or rural areas and all those kind of things, how it's normalized is different to what it would be normalized in university spaces. So for example, how it would be normalized in university spaces would be I'm trying to think of an example from the top of my head. How would it be normalized in a university? Like the constant I want to go back to this thing that it's because it exists within the constructs of patriarchy, and that then dictates how people interact with each other. Whether you find yourself outside of the university space or outside of the professional space or even outside of a domestic space, when you find yourself at home and all those kind of things. So because it's existing within the system, it continues and it changes form depending on where it is.
So because, for example, I mean, universities, people that come from universities come from the larger society.
Yes.
People that are part of political organization, the trade union movement, and these are spaces that have been rocked by a lot of scandals, if you will, and how we see a lot of issues around the culture of rape within these spaces, the trade union movement in South Africa. And would remember, the issue around the former GS of Kosatu, Zwelinzi Mavavi as well, around those issues as well. The political parties as well, people soliciting pictures of women. I mean, we could talk about that. But of course, what you're basically saying is that these spaces don't exist in isolation. They form part of a larger society and that exists within a patriarchal framework. But I mean, let's talk about the kind of activities that happen on campuses. And I know you've been in the forefront of some of these, especially during the Fees Must Fall movement. Maybe let's talk about the Fees Must Fall movement and what led to a situation where within the Fees Must Fall movement, there were women that were saying within even this particular struggle for a fight for free quality education, there are issues that pertain to women in particular. Maybe take us through that.
So you find yourself in a political space, and you're gathered there, for example, as black people, and the common cause there at that point in time is race. So it's liberation from racial oppression or structural racism or whatever it is. So when you find yourself in that space, and then now you find yourself as a woman, and you say, but I matter and all those things, often you get dismissed and also silenced by things like, no, you're going to delay the revolution, we need to be liberated as black people first before we get to other issues and all those kind of things. And that kind of thing has happened before. I'm pretty sure many times women who are part of the liberation struggle, whether it's in South Africa, in Africa, or even in the US, we're constantly reminding people that I'm also a woman and there are also kinds of oppression that actually apply to me that I also want to be freed from. But then you're told that, no, man, the common goal at this point in time is just, for example, the Fees Must Fall, free education. When we're done with that, then we'll look into issues of feminism, we look into issues of homophobia, we look into issues of, for example, disabilities, because also those kind of people, like Fees Must Fall is a movement, for example, that has different types of people in there. It has women, it has people with disabilities, it has homosexuals, it has all those kind of things. So, but because now people want to prioritize an oppression that applies only to men, because that's what it is. Racial oppression only applies to men, whereas now when you come to a woman, there are also issues of gender, and also to some extent also issues of class. So it's only that the oppression at that point in time that is given importance is one that only applies to men, and we are going to push that one, we don't want you to delay the movement, blah, blah, blah. Because many times when women came up, they'd always be accused of, hey, you're disrupting the movement, you're dividing the movement, you're doing all those sorts of things, because it's like you don't matter, you don't deserve to be in that space. The only reason you need to be there is because you need to be a number, so that we look like a mass, protest or whatever it is, so that people take us seriously. But you should just be there as a number, you should not have a voice. You don't matter at that point in time until we get to this, I don't know, end goal that will only have freed men. So, yeah, I don't know if...
No, I hear you. But do you think people recognize, and I think in the main, Do you think people recognize that there is a culture of rape that exists? And I think because for us to, in order to deal with some of those issues, there needs to be, a process where people acknowledge the fact that, they're involved and they're complicit in some of these, involved in the culture of rape. Do you think people recognize, what we're talking about, the whistling, the catcalling, issues around, the many issues that you've raised, do people recognize that?
So many times you'll find yourself in a situation where someone says, but teach me, what do you mean when you say rape culture? And you tell them, you say, for example, when you see me walk down the road and you whistle at me, that contributes to it. And then they come back and say, but how am I supposed to ask you out? So you find yourself now, and you're like, but dude, you said I must tell you what is it that I find problematic. And I'm telling you, but now you're telling me otherwise, So many times people will say, okay, show me what it is. And then you show them and then they deny it.
Okay. So let's pause there. I want us to go for a quick ad break. When we come back, I really want us to revisit this conversation around people being able to recognize. But what you're saying is when we tell people that this is what rape culture is, and this is how you are basically guilty of this particular, culture of rape that you're involved in, and people don't recognize that in particular. But let's go for a quick ad break and we'll take the conversation when we come back. Welcome back from the ad break, and in the studio I'm still joined by Sarah Mukwevho, a feminist from Wits University, but also a master's student. Before the ad break, Sarah, we're talking about, whether or not, do people recognize the fact that, they're actively involved in the culture of rape? And you're saying, even when there are attempts to teach people, in particular, I think we must call it out, when we attempt to teach men and, educate them that this is what rape culture, the culture of rape involves. There's still that kind of patronizing responses around, but what must I do? How do we begin to deal with such issues, How do we confront those issues?
So firstly, I like saying, and it's also common knowledge, that it's not the responsibility or the duty of the oppressed to teach the oppressor. Because many times then, when you tell someone that actually you are hurting me in this way, they come back and dismiss it. To say, but no, I'm not hurting you, what do you mean, and all those kind of things. So that if the conversation then starts in the teach me, you get, yes, as you say, the patronizing response. So what I like saying, especially when I found myself in a university space, I'm like, guys, we're all on the same internet. We all have the same access to libraries. We all have the same access to literally any resource that can teach you. So go do that, do your work on your side, and then come back and then let's talk so that we help each other understand things better. Because many times when you want to tell someone what it is, they're going to come back and counter it and say, no, actually, that's not the way it is because that's how I'm used to it. Because it's also normally this silly thing of wanting to refer back to, but no, that's the way it's always been done, whatever. For example, you'll speak about being a feminist and then someone's going to come and tell you that, no, but my mom cooks for my dad. That's not what I'm talking about. And also there's nothing wrong with being a feminist and also still adhering to the traditional gender roles, So it's the teaching process, it becomes tricky because also teaching is work. It's work, and sometimes people have this sort of entitlement that when maybe you're a feminist or you're an activist or whatever it is, they want to demand your time. They want you to teach them about whatever it is. And it's not that way. It's not my responsibility to teach you about my oppression. It's not my responsibility to teach you about my humanity. If anything, you're supposed to recognize me as human by default. And how you then interact with me actually should be on a human basis and not on a, no, now I want you to teach me and I want you to tell me 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then you still come back and say, no, but no, what you're saying is wrong. So that process is, I personally, and I think I know a few people that always avoid finding themselves in that situation where now someone says, teach me, and then you actually sit down and you dedicate your time and you teach that person because it exhausts you, because also you're just reliving all sorts of things that you've been through as a person. So yeah.
Now let's talk about language, and I mean language is quite instrumental in terms of breaking and making, even also at a conversational level, the way in which we refer to things, how has language, and I mean we talked about catcalling and women being labeled as various things, issues around promiscuity and women being labeled a whore, for example, in certain spaces in order to, either demoralize women, discourage women, vilify women as well. And I mean, we can cite various examples around this issue. But how has language and how instrumental is language in terms of, the issues around rape culture, reinforcing and perpetuating rape culture? So
language reinforces things. It reinforces things, it normalizes things and all those kind of things. Because, for example, like how you said that people say, hey, that exam paper raped me. you know. In that process, you are sensationalizing rape, and you're also normalizing it, because the next moment someone hears about it, they're not going to be alarmed to say, oh, actually you've mentioned the word rape, and it's quite a serious thing, you know. So language and terming of things is quite very important, because it perpetuates things, or it changes things. Another example I'd sort of like make, it's how maybe, for example, you have people that say, no, don't call me female, because female does not actually take into consideration all the aspects of my personhood, you know. And then you have someone, you know, the Teach Me group, and they say, but if I can't call you female, what am I supposed to call you? And you say woman, and they still refuse to call you that, but you did say to them that this is what I want you to call me. So language and words and all those kind of things, they're very instrumental in either effecting change or perpetuating the problematic behaviors that we see with people, because it's also with like the kind of interaction you have with people. And sometimes people say things, and I don't know if they're unaware or what, but one of the example I remember, I was in some dialogue, and then this guy wanted to say something, and then when he was responding, he was like, I am going to respond in a very logical way. And I was like, why do you need to qualify the fact that you are going to respond in a logical way? Are you trying to say everyone else was being illogical in this room, and now you find the need to actually qualify? So in that instance, that's also him disregarding everyone else around him, and he's doing that through what? Through words, you know. So words are also quite important in how people actually, express themselves, and also how everyone else around them actually takes that thing.
Sure. I mean, you're raising a quite important issue in the beginning when you're talking about the fact that, you know, we slowly become desensitized, you know, to what rape is. I mean, it's a violent act. And when you say the exam raped me, you know, so casually, as though, you know, it's okay, you know, as opposed to say, you know, the exam was really hard, and I think I did quite badly at it, you know. And I think it's and I'm hoping the viewers that are watching, you know, we begin to acknowledge the role that language is playing in reinforcing and perpetuating the culture of rape within our communities and our societies. But perhaps also let's look at the law, you know, the way in which, and I mean, we talk about this all the time, you know, the law must evolve, and, you know, the law always must evolve and, you know, reflect an evolving society, you know. Of course, I mean, today you talk about the way in which families are made up, you know, you can't talk about like a wife, kids, husband with a wife, 2.5 kids, dogs, picket fence, whatever the case might be. Families, you know, the makeup is quite different. And in the way in which we view, understand, orientation, everything needs to also change, and the law needs to also adapt to that. But when you speak particularly to these issues, you learn about the rape victimization of rape victims, for example, when you go to the police station, rape kits that are left unattended, either because people are not skilled or there are not enough people to attend to these things. And these are serious issues, you know, within, you know, from, I think, the hospital, the police station, the reporting mechanisms, and women just become so discouraged because you get the humiliated. You're told it's a, you know, it's a personal matter, it's a domestic dispute. How can rape be, with your husband? Exactly. How can rape be a domestic dispute? It's a violent act. But I mean, maybe also just take us through some of the issues that, you know, you've identified around the law and its complicitness in issues around rape culture.
So many a times when it comes out that someone has raped someone, maybe also in instances where it has to do with someone who's the perpetrator, someone who's famous, or someone who's money and all those kind of things, you always hear many people say, no, but then let's wait for the law, let's hear what the courts say and all those kind of things. And justice doesn't necessarily, like a criminal verdict isn't necessarily justice.
Apartheid was law. I mean.
Exactly, you know. So, and another, my main issue is that rape is treated as normal crimes, like a break-in, and then they want evidence, and then when they find evidence, then they're able to convict the perpetrator and all those kind of things. But it's different. Like the crime of rape and the crime of breaking in or murder, those are different things, because even with murder, they say, okay, show us the body and all those kind of things so that we know that it's a crime, and then we want to convict the person and we want to do all those sorts of things. But there's hardly any evidence, because I also say that they also expect rape victims to react logically to rape. For example, you get raped, and because you hate that someone forced themselves on you and all those kind of things, maybe you want to go take a shower and just get rid of that whole thing. And then maybe you go lay a charge and they say, actually, you got rid of all the evidence, there's nothing we can do. You know, and they take it as if you always walk around with your phone set on recording, because you're going to record everything that happens to you and all those kind of things. So the law doesn't actually look into it doesn't look into the crime of rape in its own specific manner, although it quite evolves. There's one case that I once read about where I think what had happened is that an adult had raped a kid. I'm not sure about the sex of the kid. I think it was a boy. And then it was actually anal rape. So now the court had to decide that because normally, you know, the normal sex organs are the vagina and the penis. Does it now apply and all? But it took forever for us to actually to get to that point, because even now, like, if you can't prove that this person was staring at my boobs the whole time and they made me feel belittled and all those things, the sexual harassment case might not hold. So the crime of rape and sexual violation is not, it's treated like it's normal crime, and that is not okay, because it doesn't guarantee justice to the victim. Because many a times you can't prove that it happened to you, because sometimes also there's no physical interaction. And also if that physical interaction, as you said, police are not actually well equipped to deal with the rape kit and all those kind of things, because you can go to a police station and say I've been raped, and then they're like, hey, okay, we don't know what to do, or let's wait for whoever, and all those kind of things. Because I remember also this one time I accompanied a friend to the police station, and there were only male police officers at night. And we asked them, we're like, so what happens if someone comes and report a case? Like, no, we'll call another police station, and then they'll have a female officer come, and all those kind of things. And I'm like, imagine if you've just been raped, and now you have to be told that they don't have enough staff, or a rape kit, or whatever it is. So I think the law doesn't take the rape issue seriously, and it's informed by a whole lot of things. And also because it's bodies of women that are involved in that issue.
Sure, I mean, you're raising quite, I mean, for me, the issue of re-victimization, the fact that you must wait at the police station for hours to get assistance, you know, and I mean, you've suffered physical and both psychological trauma. And the idea of also, I mean, you also, in that moment, I would assume, you know, you view the structure, the physical, a man standing in front of you, you know, I think you treat them quite differently in that moment, in that space, in that time. And having to also, you know, and I'm not saying that men, police officers that are men are not capable of, you know, dealing with a particular issue, but I think it is an issue that must be taken into consideration. Sarah, maybe last parting shots. I know that we've raised quite a couple of issues, and the one thing as well that's quite interesting is around how we respond also to celebrities, you know, that, you know, issues around, you know, domestic gender-based violence, sexual assault, sexual harassment as well. You know, it's always no, but it's innocent until proven guilty. You're destroying the person's, we've had this many times, the person's career, you know, especially when it's a famous person. The career is always now the issue that must be dealt with first, as opposed to the crime in question. At least parting shots, Sarah, maybe, how do we begin to just, maybe parting shots, give our viewers advice? How do we begin to deal with some of the issues that we've raised?
So I think, firstly, media is part of the problem, because many a times they always want to give the perpetrator a chance to tell us their side of the story. And with the victim, they don't want to listen to them much. With the recent case, it was Arthur Mafokate who hit or physically violated his girlfriend, or then girlfriend, Usisi. And what happened was that we saw one magazine having Arthur in the front page with his daughters and saying that, oh, I will kill anyone that ever touches my daughter. But fam, you almost killed someone else's daughter a while back, and no one actually gave her time to actually, you know, want to find out her side of the story, if this thing has been going on, and also create some sort of awareness around it. But rather what media does, they want to go after the other person, and then actually the perpetrator, not even the other person, so that we hear that side of the story, whereas they're the ones in the wrong. And also the way they painted a picture of Arthur, they painted him as the saint because they had him next to his kids. So in our heads, of course, by default, when you're seeing this man who's next to his lovely daughters, exactly, you don't see him someone who's harmful, and he is harmful. He's harmed someone else on the side. We also had the case with Malum Cool Cat, and he got so much airplay and all those things that even when he had concerts and blah, 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 tickets sold out. But people will tell you that if you accuse someone of rape, you're ruining their reputation. We have many successful men that were implicated in rape scandals, domestic abuse scandals, but they're still doing well because they still afforded this privilege by the patriarchy system that we exist in. Whereas as a woman, like, it's late for you, you're going to suffer psychological, you know, damage, and it actually affects how you operate going forth, and whether or not the person is found guilty, and you know, and
sure. Stuff. Unfortunately, Sarah, that's all the time we have on the show. Thank you so much for joining us onto the show.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you so much for you at home for joining us onto the show. Tune in next week as well. Have a good evening.